What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Prophecy Misfits Podcast. This is episode 380. In time of war, 380 of these things. Crazy. But yeah, thank you for joining me. This is what we do on Tuesdays and Saturdays. We get together and we watch all the crazy things happening around the world right now. There is a ton of very interesting things, especially right now. The big stuff is kind of morphed back into some smaller things that might eventually morph into some bigger things. It's kind of interesting how it continues to go up. What's the saying? Peaks and valleys type of deal. But yes, a lot of interesting things going on, and we get together and we watch for these things. We pay attention to them. We try and understand what they are to the best of our ability, so we're not caught off guard, and we can use these as witnessing tools to share the gospel with as many people as we can before we are out of here. And I pray that that is soon, but it is according to the Lord's timeline and not mine. If it was according to mine, we'd be having this meeting up in the mezzanine right now. Anyways, but yeah, glad to have you guys here. And if you're new, welcome in. Thank you for joining us. In time of war, like I said, plenty of things going on that we're going to be talking about. Some of the stuff we got going on is the Strait of Hormuz is allowing some ships to go through if they're willing to pay a $2 million fee in Chinese yuan. Pretty interesting. We'll kind of get into some details regarding that. We also got some updates regarding aluminum and plastics, stuff that we use every day in our lives. So that does affect us in several ways. Trump is imposing a 100% tariff on brand name drugs. We'll talk about that situation. A pound of ground beef now costs more than federal minimum wage. Yeah, we seem to be inching closer to that whole, passage regarding the ingredients for a loaf of bread as a day's wage. Pretty interesting. But yeah, we'll talk about that. Higher gas prices affecting us drastically. We'll go over some details and numbers regarding that. We got some updates regarding Oracle and layoffs, and we'll talk about. I got to take the gloves off for a moment on this episode regarding some things, so we'll talk about that. I won't spoil it quite yet, but yeah, we got to bring that up. Looks like the United States is shifting towards a wartime economy. Where they're trying to cut back some non-defense spending in order to increase significantly defense spending or military spending. So we'll talk about that. The Trump administration is dismantling the U.S. Forest Service. We also got $377 million budget request for an executive residence renovation for Trump. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Trump's looking to reopen Alcatraz. He gave us a peek of that last year when he said he wanted to do it. Now he's actually putting in for it. We got some more shakeups regarding the top brass of the military, privatization of the TSA. We also got updates regarding NATO, the EU, the United States, Russia, and a whole bunch of stuff regarding that, which is very important that we pay attention to any updates coming out regarding that, in my opinion, because I believe that is what is we're building up towards a serious shift regarding all of that. For those who've been around my channel, you know that's something we've been talking about a lot. So we'll talk about that. More information coming out regarding that, and then some updates regarding the new interim attorney general and that whole situation there. So a few things to discuss. So plenty of things going on. And Heppner Forest Service office moving here to Utah. Yeah, we'll talk about that. It's pretty much getting eliminated. They're moving the office to Utah, but it's not going to be anything like it was before. So we'll talk about it. It's pretty much being executed, to be honest. So, how's everybody doing? I'm seeing a couple new people in there. I saw Ninja Penguin, which, of course, that's going to grab my attention because of my love of penguins. So that's a cool name. Andrea is here. Good to see Andrea, and Heppner as well. Good to see you guys. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully everybody had a good week. Passover week going on and all that. So thanks for joining me. Let's go ahead and get into housekeeping.
Housekeeping?
I think you're sleeping.
Housekeeping?
Chris Believer in Jesus says, hide the ninja penguins. Well, you don't need to hide them because they're ninjas. They're already hiding themselves. So either way. Anyways, housekeeping, usual spiel. If you guys can, like, share, subscribe, get this out to as many people as you can. It's not about, wait, what? I have no idea what on earth that comment's about, but just gonna glide pipe right past it. If you guys can be so wonderful and like, share, subscribe, I'd certainly appreciate it. We're trying to gain as many people as we can to see what is actually going on. And it's not about trying to increase numbers or anything like that, but it is trying to get out there and reach those who are trying to understand what is going on, and who most of them don't have the gospel, don't have Jesus Christ, don't have salvation and the hope that we do. So liking, sharing, and subscribing does help reach those people. If you guys can do me a solid, I'd appreciate it. Also, if you guys want to, you can follow along on Rumble and Telegram. Those are my backup channels. If I get booted off YouTube, we'll be back up live streaming over on Rumble. So please follow over there if you have those platforms. If not, don't worry. Just make sure you bookmark the WretchedWatchmen.com website. That's your one-stop shop to stay up to date on everything happening in the world of the Wretched Watchmen stuff. You'll find the latest podcasts and live streams, the announcement page, the free book to download, and all of that jazz is there. So feel free to bookmark that website so you're always up to date. And last but not least, if you guys like to support this channel and what I got going on, I got donation links down below. CashApp, Venmo, and Give, Send, Go. This channel is not monetized. Don't make anything from ads, views, or anything like that. We don't sell things. We don't do paywalls. We don't do memberships or subscriptions. We don't do anything like that. I believe it needs to be 100% free. And it's one of those things where if we walk in accordance with the Lord will provide for us accordingly. And so you guys have done just that here, and I appreciate you all for your support and your prayers and donations and everything. You guys are awesome. So thank you guys for that. Appreciate it. All right. So that is the housekeeping. What's going on? I have no idea. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the chat. I need to not do that. We got stuff going on. All right. Let's go ahead and get into it. Is Saturday, so let's get into what we got going on with the Wretched Weather Report.
Everybody got their fancy hats? Let's go!
All right, so the Wretched Weather Report, what we do is we keep track of the trends of what is going on with the crazy things happening, earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, tsunamis, tornadoes. I said tornadoes already. All that stuff, flying pigs, flying cows. We just keep track of what's going on of the natural events because we know that these are part of the birth pains that are going to increase in size and frequency as we get closer and into the day of the Lord. And so it's worth keeping track of what is going on, not only for us in our watchfulness of being watchmen, as we're called, but also it grants us the ability to pray for those around the world affected by these things. And as we know, the Lord works through tragedy when they strike. And so it's always good to keep that in mind as we pray for these people. And so this past week, a lot of crazy earthquakes, large scale, many of them specifically in Indonesia. And the list starts out with a 7.3, and that's not even the big one of the week. So that should tell you something. But as far as earthquakes, this past week, 5.5 magnitude and up. We got a 7.3 in Luganville, Vanuatu, a 5.7 in the Kermadec Islands, New Zealand, 5.7 in the Fiji Island region over there, 6.0 in Leoncio Prado, Peru. The big one of the week is a 7.4 in Ternate, Indonesia. And then there's a 5.5, a 5.7, a 6.2, a 5.9, a 5.8, and a 5.6 in Indonesia as well as follow-ups. And that's not even counting the numerous smaller aftershocks below the 5.5 magnitude range that also struck around that region as well. So I'm not exactly sure what the damage is regarding all of this stuff, but usually when there's that many and those of that size, there's usually a lot of structural damage and whatnot that's been done. So please pray for those in Indonesia dealing with the after effects of these earthquakes. Then there's a 5.5 in Tavildara, Tajikistan. Then there's a 5.8 in Urim, Afghanistan, a 5.9 in Bitung, Indonesia, 5.5 in the Mid-Indian Ridge, a 6.0 in Miangas, Indonesia, a 5.5 in Hualien City, Taiwan, and then a 5.5 in Ulara, Australia. So a lot of earthquakes, lot of large-scale earthquakes. Please be praying for those in Indonesia. As far as volcanoes, 41 active volcanoes are erupting around the world as of right now. No change from last week. You got 6 in North America, 5 in South America, 1 in Europe, 2 in Antarctica, 3 in Africa, 15 in Asia, and 9 in Oceania. So that's what we got as far as that. So earthquakes definitely escalated. Definitely escalated from last week. Yeah. Plus, there's still fires in the Midwest. If you guys don't know, there is fires in the Midwest still ablazing over there, so be praying for those. There's also another massive heat wave getting ready to hit end of next week, I believe. There's supposed to be another heat wave coming, which will probably affect more of those fires and whatnot. So, and then as far as any other weather events, again, I try my best to keep track. I don't necessarily collect them all. So if you're aware of those, please put them in the comments so we can pray for all of those affected by them. We need to make sure that we continue to pray for people around the world. Keep them in mind. So. All right. What is going on? I'm still getting distracted by the chat. There's just a lot of interesting things popping up in the chat. Anyways. All right. What's going on? Okay. Anyways, let's go ahead and get going with all the stuff. Again, plenty to talk about. And so let's just go ahead and start rolling with it, shall we? So starting off here, this is a pretty interesting situation to keep an eye on, specifically because the narrative has been telling us that the opposite of this was occurring, but yet past history from the elites themselves tell us that this is more inclined of what we should expect going forward. And so yuan fees for ships to pass Hormuz boost Chinese payment stocks. Again, we've been getting told that this whole thing was to take down China. That's the narrative. That's what we continue to get pounded into our skulls by the media, by prophecy teachers, and by talking heads on podcasts and stuff. Hello, I'm one of those talking heads. But I've been talking about the opposite of this, and it has nothing to do with trying to take down China. And actually, this is actually being used by China in order to propel something that we were told from 2011 regarding the US dollar. And so Iran, who currently still controls the Strait of Hormuz, even though Trump has told us that it's been open for business, 6 times now. Every time has been a lie. Shocker. They still control it, and they're charging some ships. Just yesterday, a French ship passed through the Strait of Hormuz because they paid $2 million in Chinese yuan to get through, and they did. It's amazing. So this is a development that, again, you're not going to be seeing much on the mainstream news, but this is certainly something that we need to pay attention to. So shares of Chinese companies that offer cross-border payments rose after the Commerce Ministry noted that the yuan is being used to pay tolls for passage through the Strait of Hormuz. CNPC Capital Co., a financial service unit of China National Petroleum Corp., jumped by as much as the 10% daily limit in Shenzhen. Lakala Payment Co., a leading Chinese third-party payments provider, climbed as much as 7.9%, while financial technology firm Shenzhen Forms Centron Information Co. rose 9.4%. And it says, while China has been striving for yuan internationalization, actual application in the Hormuz provides a concrete use case that markets have been waiting for. Analysts said that the development reinforces expectations that geopolitical conflicts may channel incremental capital towards China. Very interesting. Again, it says analysts said development reinforces expectations that geopolitical conflicts may channel incremental capital towards China. All the Western media continues to tell us it's the opposite. However, we're starting to see a situation where the Chinese yuan is being used because of the conflict being done, which is taking money away from the petrodollar, ultimately decreasing the value of the dollar as it is anyway, which, if you want to take it down to brass tacks, is nothing more than toilet paper. But it's what is currently being used. So as a post on the Ministry of Commerce website, which cited a recent Lloyd's List report, said that the vessels are paying $2 million fees to Iran for transit of the key energy transportation waterway, and that these can be paid in yuan. And again, we just had an example yesterday of a French ship paying that $2 million in yuan to Iran to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, which they were allowed to do so. Pretty interesting. So why is this important? Why is this significant? Even though it's a small amount, I know $2 million to us is a lot, but to this whole situation, it's a small amount of yuan being taken away from the petrodollar because of this situation. Why is this important? Because we were told in 2011, if you guys remember, I've played the interview several times. This was post the 2008 financial crash, which was a trigger point, an orchestrated trigger point, in order to begin the devaluation of the dollar, to keep us in a recession. We've been in a recession ever since that whole thing occurred. We never got out of it. And on top of that, it also has to do with transferring the United States financial system to BlackRock. But we were told by what's his face, all of a sudden his name slips my mind. The elite dude, I can't remember his name all of a sudden. It'll come back to me. He told us in an interview that this financial situation of the 2008 financial crisis was going to trigger a controlled demolition of the United States dollar, and the Chinese economy was going to be the engine of it. And so when we see all of a sudden the transfer of the petrodollar is not being used anymore through the Strait of Hormuz and is now being transferred over to the Chinese yuan, you are seeing the next evolution of the devaluation of the US dollar, and it's now being contributed by Chinese economy that's doing just that. And so this situation, which again, you're not going to see George Soros, that's the name I was trying to think of. I told you it'd come to me. It just, my hamsters up there, they can only go through filing cabinets as fast as they can. George Soros, he said this in 2011. And so what we're seeing right now is you're not going to see this in the mainstream media. You're not going to hear Trump say this. You're not going to hear Pete Hegseth say this. You're not going to hear Marco Rubio say this. You're not going to hear Carolyn Levitt say this. You're not going to hear this on Fox, CNN, or any of those news sites or anything. But what you are going to see under all of what we're hearing from the news is that plan, which they told us they were doing, and the trigger point was 2008, is still currently in the works. And this Strait situation is causing that problem. So this is significant. Not anything you're going to hear in Western media, but very, very significant. All right. Moving over to some updates regarding aluminum and plastic. Again, this stuff affects our everyday lives. And it says EGA issues Al Tawila aluminum update. And it says Emirates Global Aluminum estimates it will take up to a year before aluminum operations are resumed at its production site in Al Tawila, Abu Dhabi. Early indications are that a complete restoration of primary aluminum production could take up to 12 months. The site sustained significant damage as a result of the Iranian missile and drone attack on the facility in the Khalifa Economic Zone, Abu Dhabi. The site, including the smelter and cast house power plant, Tawila Aluminum Refinery, and Tawila, say that 5 times fast, recycling plant, was fully evacuated and the facilities entered emergency shutdown. So again, aluminum, this is stuff that goes on buildings and construction material to everything down to soda cans, soup cans, and all that. Think about, it's not something that we necessarily think about in our everyday lives, but stop and think about how much aluminum you currently see or is used in your everyday life, and you'll notice that this is actually significant. So this is going to be a situation where, while the price of the soup that you're buying, the canned soup, is not going up, the price of what it's being put in is going up. And so you will feel the effects of that. Plus, there's going to be a lower lack of supply coming from it as well. So it's all significant. It says Tahuila smelter produced 1.6 million tons of cast metal in 2025. EGA has substantial metal stock on the water and on ground in the UAE and some overseas locations. Al Tahuila aluminum refinery produced 2.4 million tons of alumina in 2025 and met 46% of EGA's total aluminum needs. And Al Tahuila recycling plant has an annual production capacity of 185,000 tons per year, all taken off, and they said it could be at least a year. Even if this thing stops, this war stops right this very second, it could take up to a year before this aluminum production starts kicking back in to the global supply. So very significant. Plus, we have this. Formosa Chemicals joins industry in unforeseeable circumstance declaration. It says Formosa Chemicals and Fiber has joined other Taiwanese petrochemical companies in declaring force majeure, noting that supplies of certain products could be reduced starting in April due to the upstream raw material shortages. For those who don't know force majeure, it's one of those things where they basically, a company declares that they cannot fulfill a contract and they are not legally obligated to do so because of events that force them from being able to do so. So when a company declares this, it means we cannot fulfill our contract because of other circumstances that are beyond our control. And so they're not legally obligated, and that cancels out the contract. This is the announcement follows ongoing conflict in the Middle East and continued shipping disruptions through the Strait of Hormuz, which have affected the global petrochemical supply. The company said force majeure will apply to products including styrene monomer, widely used in plastics and rubber production, phenol, and purified terephthalic acid. Best I got. This will affect everything from tires on your cars to water bottles, to other plastics, rubber bands, everything like that. This stuff is all involved in all things plastic. Again, stop and think. How much stuff do you use throughout your day that's plastic? Plastic containers, bottles, and school supplies, work supplies, stuff on your car. All of that is being affected. It says Formosa Chemicals noted that the key raw material supplies have become uncertain, particularly naphtha and light oil from Formosa Petrochemical, which have been significantly reduced. Inconsistent purchases of light oil from other sources are also affected aromatics production. Analysts and the supply constraints originate upstream. Operating rates at Formosa petrochemical facilities have dropped to around 50% and could fall to 40% in light of oil transport remains disrupted. So it's only working at half capacity right now, and it's looking to drop another 10%. Other petrochemical producers in Asia have also declared force majeure and temporarily suspended new orders, which means there's going to be a lack of plastic, which means prices go up, lack of supply starts kicking in, and we're in a world of hurt dealing with all of those things. So, yeah, these things are going to affect our daily lives. While we may not be seeing it now, these are things that we can expect to start creeping in. Again, even if the war ends tomorrow, it's not something that changes quickly. This stuff takes, when you shut these things down, these production facilities down, or reduce their capacity and whatnot, it takes several months for them to kick back up, and several more months in order for them to get back into full production. And then we have, plenty of these production facilities that have been hit and have damage to them. So now you have to repair them, and that takes a very long time depending on the damage being done. Then you have to go through safety inspection, you have to go through tests, then you have to go to kicking them on, and then slowly bringing it back online, which could take anywhere, like the one says, roughly 12 months to do so. And that's if the war ends right now. So this is one of those things that we got to remember. While we may not be seeing it yet, we may not be feeling it yet, the hurt is going to be coming here sometime in the future, depending on what you use, how you use it, and how often you use it. It's one of those things, though. I want to put this out there. There's some people out there screaming Armageddon when it comes to this stuff. I'm not seeing anything that says it's going to be Armageddon when it comes to production and supplies and whatnot. Yeah, there's going to be some hurt, but it's not there. Then I'm also seeing some other people saying that there's going to be absolutely no effect to us. There's nothing to worry about. Don't worry, everything's going to be fine. And those people are full of excrement as well. So don't go to the extremes. I always warn about that. Don't venture off when it comes to the spectrum of fully over here and fully over there. Don't do that. But it's still one of those things where, we can expect some hurt coming along with all of this. Anyways, I'll just let the mods handle that one. All right, let's talk about what's going on with pharmaceuticals, shall we? This is there's some twists and turns involved with this one. It says Trump signs order imposing 100% tariff on brand name drugs, specifically brand name drugs. I'll explain why that's important in just a second. It says Trump signed an executive order Thursday targeting imported brand name drugs with a 100% tariff, citing that the U.S.'s import reliance as a reason for the decision. I have determined that it is necessary and appropriate to impose 100% ad valorem duty rate on the import of patented pharmaceuticals and associated pharmaceutical ingredients, Trump executive order stated. I have no idea why that's highlighted green. That's weird. It says drugs coming from the European Union, Japan, South Korea, or Switzerland and Liechtenstein. I always love saying that. I wish there was more news coming out of Liechtenstein just because of how much fun it is to say it. Seriously, little interactive moment. Say Liechtenstein. It's fun. Anyways, European Union, Japan, South Korea, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein will be subject to a 15% tariff on drugs from the United Kingdom will face an unspecified lower rate subject to a US-UK trade agreement. It says the order also includes several exemptions. Tariffs will not be applied to generic drugs, orphan drugs, or brand name drugs made by companies who have entered into most favored nation agreements with the administration. Throughout 2025, Trump has pressured drug companies like Pfizer and Bristol Myers Squibb into entering most favored nation deals with the threat of imposing heavy tariffs on their products. Okay, so this is where things start getting interesting. So the first thing that we need to know is most of our generic pharmaceuticals that we receive here in the Western world, that includes United States, Canada, Mexico, Australia. I'm not sure about the European side of things, just over here on this region. Most of our generic drugs, most of us don't spend the extra money for the brand name stuff. We get the generic stuff. Most of those pharmaceuticals come over from like India and whatnot, and those countries over there, and they're not able to pass through the Strait of Hormuz right now, which means we don't have that shipment coming in. We talked about this a couple weeks ago in one of our episodes where it's the generic drugs, like 50 or 60% of our generic drugs are not getting through the Strait of Hormuz, which means we're going to have a issue there. That's the generic stuff. There's no tariffs on that. We're not even getting the supply in. Trump's not putting the tariffs on that. He's putting it on the name brand drugs, the ones that are still coming into our country, which means those are the ones that we're going to be paying 100% tariff fees on. That's not, again, the companies that are going to be paying for that. That's just going to get passed on to us. Now, where this most favored nation agreement comes into play is his Trump RX program. Trump RX, of course, he makes money off of every sale that goes through Trump RX, of course. Doesn't sell generic drugs. They only sell brand name pharmaceuticals, specifically most favored nation agreements. So what is going on with this is he has halted the importing of generic drugs, which is the cheapest option for all of us. And then he slapped 100% tariff on all other name brand drugs that are still coming into the country. And then he's enticing people to buy these specific name brand drugs off of his own website that he makes money off of. You guys see how this is all working out? How he's designing this to pull one over on all of us so he can make money with all of his big pharma buddies who have signed deals with him. You guys see how this is all working now? Very interesting. Very interesting. So while the headline itself is bad, Trump signs order imposing 100% tariff on name brand drugs, there's a whole lot more to it, which is hurting us and making him money. Yeah, there's always something to it. Speaking of which, how about a pound of ground beef now costs more than the federal minimum wage? Again, we're starting to see signals. We've been seeing them, but we're starting to see more signals pointing towards the scripture again that talks about the coming prophecy that's going to bring about a day's wage costing, basically it costs a day's wage to get the ingredients for a loaf of bread. And that's where we're coming from on this one. It says the cost of a pound of ground beef has hit a major threshold. Depending on where you shop, the grocery staple likely costs more than the federal minimum wage. Money analyzed ground beef prices at 7 of the most popular grocery chains across the United States, finding that 1 pound of the typical 20% fat ground beef costs between $6.49 and $8.96. Organic, grass-fed, leaner varieties tend to cost much more. On the other hand, the federal minimum wage sits at $7.25 per hour. The U.S. Department of Agriculture estimates that the typical American consumes nearly 60 pounds of beef each year. Widely available and easy to prepare, ground beef serves as a grocery mainstay for many families, and lately, prices have been skyrocketing. I don't know about you guys, but when we went through some hard times when I was a kid, and we went through some hard times as a family, one of the things that was widely available for those going through hard times, financial hard times, was the lovely meal of Hamburger Helper, which you could get by making a batch of Hamburger Helper for a family of 4, and everybody was satisfied, and you got a good meal. Well, those days are gone because of the price of what's going on, specifically beef, because you have to get a thing of ground beef for it. And so even the impoverished meals of Hamburger Helper and whatnot, those days are long gone. It says rising beef prices are due in large part to an ongoing cattle crisis. According to a blog post from the American Farm Bureau Federation, beef cow inventory has hit the lowest point since 1961. We've gone over that in the past as well. The cattle price or the cattle count, it's not the word I was looking for, but the amount of cattle in the United States has hit the lowest point since the 60s, and it's not going to get any better. It's not going to get fixed. One of the issues is because Trump signed an executive order to import cheap beef from Argentina, which only hurts the American farms even more, and they can't afford the water for the cattle. They can't afford the feed for the cattle. They can't just afford to take care of the cattle themselves. Plus, there's all the wildfires that are happening, which are eating up a lot of the ranchers' land that the cattle are on. And then on top of that, the Argentina beef that's being passed around seems to have a lot of contamination problems, things that are actually very bad for humans. China canceled a giant shipment of Argentina beef because it had a toxin in there. And so that stuff's getting passed to us. And so you guys can see here, they went through the 80-20 price per pound, and it's not very good. Says the federal minimum wage has not budged since July of 2009 when it reached $7.25. The 17-year stagnation is the longest in U.S. history. We're not going to get into the whole talks of is minimum wage good? Is it bad? What does it do to the economy? We're not even going to go there. We're just looking at the here and now and the effects of what we're dealing with. And it's not a good situation. At the time, the $7.25 national minimum wage was set. A pound of ground beef cost about $2.20 per pound. So when the minimum wage was set at $7.25, ground beef actually cost $2.20. Now it's it costs more than an hour's work in order to get a pound of ground beef, meaning 1 hour of work could purchase more than 3 pounds of beef, enough to make dinner for or two for a family of 4. Now it can barely cover 1. And because of the situation, again, supply chain situation, you can expect this to get worse. Plus, we have the cattle issue when it comes to the New World screwworm is still getting passed around in South America, and that whole situation. Plus, there's the Argentina beef contamination problem that's going on there. The cattle situation is not getting any better here as well, and of course, the issues with the Strait of Hormuz and the supply shipment regarding all of that as well. So you can expect those costs to go up as well. Again, this is one of those things where I'm not telling this as a way to freak anybody out or cause panic or worry or anything like that. Don't enter into that situation. Don't do that. I know there's a lot of people that are struggling and just getting by, and this is not making anything easier. I understand that. Just hang on. Continue to have faith in the Lord. Continue to hear what he's telling you to do. Go with his direction. He will provide. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be easy. Trust me, I've lived through multiple occasions where it was not easy. He got me through. I look back on it. I still have no other answer because the reality of the situation logically doesn't make sense how I made it through, but God, he got me through. And so just continue to have faith in him and continue to work and listen according to what he tells you to do, and he will take care of you. I'm a walking example of that. Okay, with all of that, still got some bad stuff, and higher gas prices have cost U.S. drivers an additional $8.4 billion because of the war, and this is regarding the gas prices. American drivers have paid an additional $8.4 billion, and this is just America. This isn't taking into account the Canadians, the Australians, Europeans. I know I got people all over the place. I don't necessarily have the numbers for you guys on this. This is just coming from the United States. It says American drivers have paid an additional $8.4 billion in fuel costs since the Iran war started, according to a new estimate from the Joint Economic Committee's Democratic minority. The lawmakers' calculation is based on the daily average gasoline prices as tracked by AAA between February 28th, when the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran, through March 31st. The figure also draws information from auto researcher Edmunds on the tank sizes of top-selling gas vehicles in the United States and on federal fuel consumption data from the Federal Highway Administration and Energy Information Administration. The average cost of gas across the United States rose to $4.08 a gallon. The average cost of gas across the United States rose to $4.08 a gallon. Meanwhile, Trump is still out there saying $2, we're below $2, greatest gas prices ever. This is on Thursday after topping $4 earlier this week for the first time since 2022, according to AAA data. And so, lovely little chart here. This is over the past year. You can see that it has skyrocketed as soon as the war took place. Now, if we jump down here, average gas prices by the state, we can see some of these prices are not good. So California, which we know is always super high as it is, last year, or let's not even go last year. Let's just go last month, $4.74 a gallon. Today, it's almost $6. Washington was $4.41 a month ago. Now it's $5.38. Oregon, $3.99 a month ago, $4.98. Arizona, $3.49 last month, $4.73. So you're looking at a $1.30 increase across the board when it comes to the gas prices because of this war happening. Oh, man. So not only are you getting charged extra to drive to the store, you're getting charged extra for the food that you're buying, you're getting charged extra for the packaging that's being put into it, and you're getting charged extra for the devaluation of the dollar, all hitting you at the same time. But again, according to Trump, we should be thanking him for what he's doing for us. Yeah. SLG says 169.9 a liter for gas here in Canada where I live. Now, I don't understand what that means, but I know for the Canadians out there, you understand what that means. Us here in America, we don't use the whole metric system and all that jazz. Oh, man. All right, let's keep it Christian in there now, guys. All right. Let's take a look at this. Oracle files thousands of H-1B visa petitions amid mass layoffs. Federal data shows that the tech giant filed for over 3,000 foreign worker visas as it cuts thousands of American jobs. So what we got going on here is we got best friend to Trump, Larry Ellison. His company, Oracle, is laying off American workers and then bringing in foreign workers through the H-1B visa program. Even though we've been told that there's been mass deportation efforts and they're trying to get all the illegals out, we're stopping the visas and we're helping the Americans because we're bringing jobs back because of all the tech jobs and the data center stuff and everything like that. And it's all a load of hooey. Because that's not what's going on, is these companies are laying off Americans and bringing in cheap foreign labor. It says Oracle, the software company headquartered in Austin, Texas, has filed thousands of petitions for H-1B visas in the past 2 fiscal years, even as it lays off thousands of American workers as part of a broader organizational shift. Federal data shows Oracle filed for 2,690 H-1B visas in the fiscal year of 2025 and 436 so far in the fiscal year of 2026, totaling over 3,100 visa requests. The H-1B visa program allows companies to temporarily employ foreign workers with specialized skills, often in the tech industry. Critics argue that the program is used to replace American workers with cheap foreign labor, while supporters say it helps fill crucial talent gaps. Oracle's visa filings amid mass layoffs raise questions about the company's motivations and the broader debate over the H-1B program impact on the American workforce. Again, this is another lie that we've been told about, how Trump was going to shut this down and he was going to take care of this and no foreign workers, American jobs, America first, make us strong again, all that propaganda, and it's nothing but lies. While the tech giants, who are all friends with Trump, who are making money off of all this stuff, continue to fire American workers as the price of everything goes up, and they're bringing in cheap foreign labor because of these visas in order to take over all the jobs that we were told were going to help Americans. This is not some conspiracy thing to conspire against Trump. This is not, I'm a Democrat and Kamala should have won. It has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with the fact of looking at what reality is and seeing that there is a massive shift, at least here in the United States, when it comes to ripping down Americans, destroying the middle class, and destroying all of what this country was operating as for a while in order to establish a brand new dependent society where the United States is shifting into a wartime military economy. And it has to do with resets of various degrees of energy to food to population to all these things. We're not going to go through the laundry lists. If I mention one, everybody's going to say, well, you forgot this and forgot that. I'm not forgetting. I'm just saying this is one of those things where it's a blossoming effect. It branches out. It's for multiple reasons, like the 2020 situation, the war situation, all of these things. There's multiple reasons for it. But the facts are there. The reality is there if you're willing to see it. And we're moving towards that significantly, especially with the latest budgetary bill that we're going to talk about in just a second. Again, this isn't one of those things where I'm just hating on a politician and stuff like that. I still get that stuff thrown at me, not as much as I used to, thankfully, but I still get that all the time. You just hate Trump. It has nothing to do with hating Trump. I think he's an absolute moron who's a con man and not as smart as people think he is. But it has nothing to do with hating who he is. I'm just trying to tell you what the reality of this situation is. Just like I told you the reality of the Biden situation. It's just, this is where we're at. We have to be able to keep an eye on all this stuff based in reality, not on our own mental idea of what's going on. And that leads us to this next thing where I got to take the gloves off again and call somebody out because of how just this man is, just to be honest, he is dangerously ignorant. He is truly dangerously ignorant and very arrogant about his level of IQ. And it shows. And when I say dangerously ignorant, I mean he talks about things that he clearly doesn't understand, or he has a preconceived notion about that he's trying to push across to everybody else, and he's deceiving people as he does it. And that is Lee Brainerd, who people who have been around my channel know that Lee Brainerd was the little pit bull guard dog that Prophecy Mafia sent after me to tell me to stop talking about Trump and other pastors. And I said no, because he doesn't have a right to tell me what I can talk about on my own channel. But he put this out. This was just a couple days ago. And he says, prophetic update and insight. President Trump is not intentionally manipulating the markets to make millions off of dollars of personal profit. I showed that is factually, with verifiable evidence, what is actually happening. But we know that he's a pump for Trump person, even though he says he's not. He absolutely is. And so he's basically saying that he doesn't know this by saying that he's not doing this. Well, we prove that that's exactly what is going on. And he comes after people like me. It says, no, those who make such claims are mixing ignorance of geopolitics and market function with conspiracy theories that have little foundation in fact. Interesting that he posted this right after I showed evidence that this is exactly what's going on. Pretty interesting how that goes. It says, the truth is Trump has from the beginning regarded the Iran operation as a short-term operation. And he has fed his plans and intentions through various venues to those who are engaged in the markets so that unreasonable panic buying and selling does not overwhelm the markets. And, to those who know when things are going to happen, and false social media posts are made in order to do a pump and dump, which again, I've proven is actually happening. He is not taking this path. And this is where it goes to show that how dangerously ignorant this man actually is. He is not taking this path merely and only to line his pockets, though the wealthy, including himself, will benefit. He is taking this path because he is intentionally trying to strengthen and bless America. So Lee Brainerd claims that Trump is intentionally trying to strengthen and bless America. However, I have years of verifiable evidence. Of course, he calls those conspiracy theories, which way to play along with the CIA propaganda psyop game. Years of evidence that shows that he is all about manipulation, corruption, and making as many deals as possible that benefits him, his family, and his friends. And he does not care about making America great again. He cares about what he can do personally along the way of making this elite globalist agenda go forward. But again, he does not believe that Trump is a globalist. Let's just make this easy. Rather than going through years of evidence, which you can just go through my channel and watch all of it, let's just make this easy. Here's how much Donald Trump is worth, shall we? The answer is $6.5 billion. It says Trump has added $1.4 billion over the past year, leveraging the presidency for profit. His cryptocurrency ventures stalled out before the election, exploded after his victory, adding an estimated $1.8 billion to his fortune overall. Another $500 million came in court, where Trump's legal team succeeded in eliminating $500 million judgment against him. His once dormant licensing business surged $400 million as foreign developers clamored to do business with an American president. Why isn't he up by more? The value of his shares in Trump Media and Technology Group, the parent company of True Social, decreased $1.3 billion since last year as the venture bleeds money. Still, with most of Trump's second term remaining, don't be surprised if billions more head his way. So in this year alone, $1.4 billion. But let's take a look at this. He's worth $6.2 billion. His net worth in 2024, before he took presidency for this second term, $2.3 billion. Since he became president, this term, it went from $2.3 billion net worth to $6.5 billion. And it's only going up because of deals that he continues to make. Market manipulation, which is verifiably true, that you can see. And he does not give a rip about America because most of these deals all have to do with personal wealth or globalist agenda and actually hurts the American people and the American infrastructure. But again, all of that will be declared conspiracy theory and TDS because it's something that ignorance cannot see. And it's something that will be denied because he has a preconceived determination regarding all of this. I didn't say anything about Lee Brainerd after the whole thing that happened when he came after me and did a public video calling me out and whatnot. But it's so interesting that he continues to post these little things like that are clearly jabs at people who are trying to make sure that the church, the believers, are properly informed of what is going on. Very interesting coming from the man who says that he stands for truth, but when he was asked 3 times on his own podcast if not voting for Trump was a sin, he could not answer the question or refused to answer the question. Yeah, I still remember that, Lee. Do you? How about this? This just came out. Company backed by Trump's son looked to sell drone interceptors to Gulf states being attacked by Iran. Because, those U.S. military ones are not working. Drone maker backed by President Donald Trump's 2 oldest sons is trying to sell to Gulf countries while they are under attack by Iran and dependent on the U.S. military, led by their father. So again, this is a case of, oh no, it's just happenstance. There's no possible way that the Trump fortune is making money off of this war that Trump started. There's no way. It's just happenstance. Right. A sales drive by Florida-based Powerus, which announced a deal last month to bring aboard Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr., positions the company to potentially benefit from a war that their father began. These countries are under enormous pressure to buy from the sons of the president so that he will do what they want, said Richard Painter, a former chief White House ethics lawyer under George W. Bush. This is going to be the first family of a president to make a lot of money off war, a war he didn't get consent for Congress for. Power's co-founder Brett Velokovich told the Associated Press that the company is making sales pitches that include drone demonstrations in several Gulf countries to show how its defensive drone interceptors could help them ward off Iranian attacks. Our team is doing many demos across the Middle East right now for our interceptors. He said in a text exchange, we have very incredible tech that can save lives. But again, no, this has to do with strengthening and blessing America. Nothing to do with, the family making money, selling it to friends in the Gulf country, in the Gulf states. No. Nothing to do with that. I think it's just Lee that hasn't had time to look into any of this stuff, and he's just making broad things out there because he's too busy setting up his Soothkeep into an IRS confirmed actual ministry that he can do taxation and all that stuff with. I think he's just a little too busy making his quote unquote ministry a business that he doesn't have enough time to actually go and look up stuff that's pretty easy to see if you're unbiased and willing to actually see the reality of the situation, as opposed to, like I said, being dangerously ignorant and arrogant about it. Sometimes you just got to call a spade a spade. That's all I can say. So let's keep going about how we're blessing America. White House asked for record-breaking $1.5 trillion for defense, a new budget request. Definitely blessing America with this. The White House is seeking to cut non-defense spending by 10%. Says the White House in its budget request for the 2027 fiscal year is asking Congress to approve roughly $1.5 trillion for defense, a record-breaking military spending request as the U.S. remains in its fifth week of war with Iran. Keep in mind that they're the ones that set the record last time with $1.1 trillion. Now they're looking for $1.5. That is a $445 billion, or a 42% increase from the 2026 total level. According to the White House, non-defense spending would be reduced by $73 billion, or 10%, according to the budget released by the White House on Friday. This includes canceling more than $15 billion in the Department of Energy grants related to clean energy, cuts the agricultural spending by 19%, and proposes slashing the Internal Revenue Services budget by $1.4 billion. Well, that's a good thing. That's actually a good thing, cutting the IRS budget. I'm in favor of that one. This is, for those who say that I can't ever praise Trump for what he's doing. Well, I'm on board with that one. President Donald Trump's budget request, which is largely a wish list sent to Congress in order to signal the administration's priorities, lists reducing violent crime and protecting national security. There's the key word. They just throw national security on whatever they want to do, which allows them to do anything. Along with protecting the homeland and removing dangerous illegal aliens as the other two spending priorities for the upcoming year. It says the budget proposes more than $19 billion for federal law enforcement, a 15% increase from 2026. The budget maintains critical funding for immigration and customs enforcement next year, equal to the 2026 level, including a $2.2 billion to maintain 41,500 immigration detention beds. It says this means legislation can be passed. This is kind of an answer for this whole landlocked shutdown thing that we got going on. It says this means legislation can be passed with a simple majority vote in Senate, and that Republicans wouldn't necessarily need Democratic support, signaling an attempt for the White House to avoid Democratic demands for non-defense increases. Reconciliation funding for 2027 will enable DHS to fully implement the president's immigration enforcement initiatives, finish construction of the border wall on the southwest border, which, by the way, they're looking to build those straight through national parks, destroying that land, which has been, kept for how long? Procure advanced border security technology, which means biometric surveillance to keep us locked in, and continue the largest recapitalization investment in the history of the U.S. Coast Guard, according to the White House. Boy, oh boy, just Trump out there blessing America. Let's learn a little bit more about this. Trump possesses historic defense spending budget, eyes 10% cuts to another federal program. This is President Trump on Friday requested a 10% cut in non-defense spending for the 2027 fiscal year and a massive $500 billion increase to the military budget. The huge proposed surge in defense spending to $1.5 trillion, up from about $1 trillion in 2026, includes a 5 to 7% pay raise for military personnel at a time when thousands of service members are actively deployed. This is a fascinating line. It says the White House boasted that this defense funding approaches the historic increases just prior to World War II. Interesting. So the United States defense funding approach is very similar to what the United States did just prior to World War II. I've hinted at the fact multiple times that things were lining up as they did back before World War II when they were attempting to do the one world system that was supposed to come from World War II. We've talked about that. And things look eerily similar around the world regarding what's happening now and how they compare to back then. Are they getting ready to take their shot again that fell through because Hitler decided that he was going to try and take over on his own? Interesting that they made that comparison. It says Trump came into office vowing to cut federal spending and rein in the nation's growing budget deficit, bringing in the world's richest person, Musk, to lead an effort that pushed about 300,000 people off the federal payroll. However, the nation's deficit, the gap between the amount of money the federal government takes in and how much it spends, has continued to widen, and the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office forecasting a $1.853 trillion shortfall in the fiscal year that ends on September 30th, deeper than last year's $1.775 trillion. So, Trump said that he was going to reduce the spending and take care of all of the financial problems. And what did he do? He went and fired a whole bunch of federal workers, installed a AI biometric surveillance system and automating system, increased the military budget, increased the prices of everything, and increased the federal deficit and the debt. Everything that he said that he was not going to do. But don't worry, Trump is intentionally blessing America. Has nothing to do with benefiting himself or a globalist agenda. No, all of this, all the lies and all of the hurt and pain is to bless us and bless America because Trump cares about us. Heartfelt. I can feel it. I'm tearing up over here. Sorry, reality is knocking at the door. I choose to let it in, not leave it out in the cold. If enacted, total federal spending would reach $2.2 trillion in 2027 compared with the roughly $1.2 trillion spent for the current fiscal year. It says the Pentagon already requested $200 billion in extra funding to pay for the Iran war, but which again was supposed to be just a short little stint. But now they're requesting another $200 billion for it. But the White House has not yet officially made that request to Congress, where it is also likely to face scrutiny from lawmakers in both parties. Other specific funding increases proposed by Trump include his controversial Golden Dome missile defense system, money to build up critical mineral supplies, which, by the way, the Trump brothers also invested in those companies. So as the U.S. government, which is led by Trump, is trying to increase the mineral supplies and investing in these companies, Trump's sons who are invested in them are making bank off of it. But again, it has nothing to do with increasing personal wealth. It has to do with blessing us. And also $65.8 billion to build 35 new combat and support ships. Again, blessing us regarding that. There are also big cuts proposed to many federal departments, including a 19% decrease for the U.S. Agricultural Department, a 12.5% cut for the U.S. Health Department, and a 52% cut for the Environmental Protection Agency. Elsewhere, Trump's budget requests a 13% increase to maximize the Justice Department capacity to bring violent criminals to justice, as well as maintaining high spending for Homeland Security and immigration enforcement at $2.2 billion, which the administration said will pay for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement operations, 41,500 detention beds, and 30,000 family unit beds. 2 days after NASA launched the most ambitious mission in decades, sending 4 astronauts on a mission around the moon under its Artemis program. Pretty interesting that they're choosing to go now on April 1st to go back to the moon. Interesting. The White House asked for a 23% decrease for that agency. So while they just sent them to go do this thing, Trump wants to decrease NASA's payroll by 23%, including a $3.6 billion cut to the agency's science unit that would cancel roughly 40 programs. Trump's budget includes $152 million for his idea to return the former Alcatraz prison island to active duty. Wow, that seems like a great use of $152 million. And $481 million to increase hiring of air traffic controllers to bulk up the staffing in airport towers across the country amid rising concerns about understaffing and air safety. Pet projects for Trump are also funded, like a $10 billion mandatory fund to establish the Presidential Capital Stewardship Program within a National Park Service to coordinate, plan, and execute targeted priority construction and beautification projects in and around Washington, D.C. You guys feel blessed yet? I can't afford a pound of ground beef, and it costs me my liver in order to fill up my gas tank. But as long as $10 billion gets put towards the beautification of Washington, D.C., all is well. Sorry for being a little sarcastic about all of this, but I'm sorry. This is just the reality of what we're living in right now. And we got Christians out there that continue to push this guy as some type of anti-globalist, America First savior for this country, even though they claim that that's not what they're saying. That's exactly what they're saying. Adding on to that, Trump administration orders dismantling of the U.S. Forest Service. The headquarters is going to Utah. Every regional office is being shuttered, and the research program is being destroyed. It says the Trump administration announced the most devastating attack on the U.S. Forest Service in the agency's 121-year history. Not a budget cut, not a policy shift, not a reorganization, an execution. They're ripping the headquarters out of Washington and shipping it to Salt Lake City, Utah, the beating heart of the anti-public lands movement in America. We'll get to that in just a second. It says they're shuttering every single one of the 10 regional offices. They're destroying more than 50 years of research facilities across 31 states, and they're replacing all of it. The offices, the scientists, the institutional knowledge, the professional independence with 15 political appointees called state directors embedded in state capitals alongside the very governors, legislators, and industry lobbyists who have spent their careers demanding that the Forest Service log more, protect less, and get out of the way. He's replacing people and offices that actually care about land and the animals and the foliage that's within it, and they're replacing it with politicians. This is what we call authoritarian fascism. Because as we know, what the United States government under the Trump administration is doing is they're destroying national parks, they're cutting down national forests, they're killing animals that are almost extinct in here. We just talked about the rice whales that they're going after. They're kicking Native Americans off of their land, which they're supposed to have. And these are the people that are now going to be taking over the U.S. Forest Service. 193 million acres of your national forests, an area larger than Texas, the largest public land agency in the country, just handed on a silver platter to the people who've spent their entire careers trying to destroy it. And they did it with a press release on Tuesday. You know what this means, guys? I hope you guys realize what's going on. This means more forests getting taken down for data centers, more forests getting taken down for oil drilling stuff, and an increase of production facilities on all of this land. Gone. Gone. What this actually is, stripped of the Orwellian window dressing, is the largest forced purge of a federal land management agency in American history. And if we jump down, it says, of all the places on earth to send this agency that manages America's national forests, they chose Salt Lake City, Utah. Utah, the state that is right now, at this very moment, suing the federal government to seize 18.5 million acres of public land. And that's where they chose to send the office, stripped of everything, led by politicians. Oh, if that's not enough, how about this one? Trump plans on spending $377 million on executive residence renovations. That's where Trump lives. So he's adding that. He wants you to pay $377 million so he can renovate where he lives. It's almost like he's planning on not leaving the office. Plus $174 million more. The fiscal 2027 budget shows a jump from $39 million to $377 million for renovations to the White House living space and possibly other areas. You guys feeling blessed yet? Are we going to get to go and stay in the executive residence that's costing us $377 million? Do we get to stay there? I don't think so. Trump plans to spend more than $377 million renovating the White House executive residence. Imagine if, again, I always like doing this because I want to put this in perspective. Imagine if Biden was doing this. Imagine if Biden was doing this. These pastors and prophecy teachers would be going ballistic. Every minute of every podcast that they put out would be ripping him apart if he was doing this. Trump's doing it, silence. That's what happens when you live according to politics. That's what happens when you declare that you're doing what the Lord is instructing you to do, but you're actually abiding by political party association. Again, the people who have been around my channel know my position on all of this. They understand that this isn't about just going ham on politics. As crazy as it sounds, because it's been the hot topic for so long around this channel, because it has to be. You can even ask my dad right now. You can ask him in chat. I hate politics with a burning passion. I can't stand talking about them. I can't. I hate them. But this is what I have to talk about so often, because this is what is currently happening right now, and we need to pay attention to what's going on. I hate politics. I hate it. But again, it's so blatantly obvious that when Biden was in office, they spent every minute that they could shredding the dude, which there's plenty of things to shred him for. But the moment Trump takes office and starts doing the things that he's doing, shifting this country into a military, authoritarian, fascist, corrupt regime where it all has to do with implementing globalist agenda and increasing his own personal wealth, it's silence. And that silence is deafening. Let's keep going. Trump plans to spend more than $377 million renovating the White House executive residence in fiscal 2026 and is estimating another $174 million on top of it for the next year, according to the White House fiscal 2027 budget request. The budget document, which proposes slashing domestic programs to help fund a $1.5 trillion bump to defense spending, estimates spending $377 million in fiscal year of 2026 under an account for repairs and renovations to the executive residence. That's a mammoth 866% increase over the $39 million estimated to have been spent in the fiscal year of 2025 on sprucing up the area of the White House where the president lives. The budget requests about $6 million in appropriated funds in fiscal 2026. It says the totals reflect budgetary projections that include not only rehabbing the White House, but also security spending costs for a number of renovations for not just the executive residence. And the spokesperson did not answer questions about what the specific project the money would go towards. Though the budget doesn't spell out exactly what the renovation funds are to be used for, Trump has reportedly expressed his fixation on repairing the White House, publicly sharing upgrades to the living quarters, including bathrooms, gold toilets, anyone, to more ambitious projects like expanding the entertainment space. Go and party like it's 1999. Not us, though. We're not allowed. This is just for him and his friends. Again, we're seeing the increase of pride, narcissism, egotistical pursuits. We're seeing greed on display. These are the things that, again, I truly believe are going to usher in the destruction of this country. I do. I believe that. I believe that Trump is a form of judgment upon this country, and that the final judgment is coming soon. And I believe that the church will be gone before that happens, but I certainly do believe that this country and most of the West is going to be destroyed or so drastically dropped into oblivion that it doesn't really matter. Because I think everything is going to shift back to where it was in the Old Testament. And the fact that this is the one who is currently leading this country right now, a level of pride that even makes Satan blush, I believe that that will lead to the destruction of this country. He's not blessing this country. He does not care about us. He's pushing the globalist agenda forward and padding as much into his pockets and onto his name as he possibly can. Again, this is not a political bash fest. I certainly do believe that this has everything to do with the last days that we are currently living in right now. And it's on display for those willing to see it, which is very few and far between. But I think most of the people that tune in here are willing to see it. I'm sure most of the people who tune in and fellowship with all of us remember what the transition was when it came to what we believed several years ago to what we believe now when it comes to everything from political affiliation and voting to history to the evil corruption of governments that we thought were perfect to, we had to crash through. We had to bust through so many walls of what we thought was real. And we had to bust through them in order to get to a point where, again, we don't see the whole picture. And there's certainly many more lies that we still believe. I'm not saying that I got it all figured out. I certainly am not claiming that in any way, shape, or form. But I believe that we have bust through many more walls of deception than many of the church that are still over there just kind of just messing around with the wall because they don't want to bust through it because it's nice and warm where they're at. When the Lord said, in these times, he started out with it. And he always says, and he said one of those things that I always say is, pay attention whenever it's said, because it's something extremely important. Take heed. He not only starts out with the warning, but says, take heed. He says, listen. Do not be deceived. I think the deception is much thicker than we realize, myself included. All right, let's keep it going. Let's talk about this Alcatraz situation. We know that he brought this up before. He wanted to open Alcatraz. Now they're designating money to do it. Why do they need to open up Alcatraz? Trump seeks $152 million to reopen Alcatraz as an active prison. The White House on Friday sought $152 million to return the former Alcatraz prison island to active duty. The request was tucked into a proposed budget the White House released to fund the government for the 2027 fiscal year. The budget seeks funds for the Federal Bureau of Prisons to cover the first year cost of rebuilding Alcatraz into a state-of-the-art secure prison facility. Trump in May announced on social media that he was directing the Bureau of Prisons, the U.S. Department of Justice, and other agencies to reopen a substantially enlarged and rebuilt Alcatraz to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders. Keep in mind, this is on top of an executive order that he signed to bring back insane asylums too. Again, all very similar things to what Nazi Germany did back in the 30s before, So yeah, looks like they might be reopening that. How about this one? When it comes to the reshaping of the military, Hegseth asks Army top general to retire and fires 2 others as the Iran war rages. Says Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Thursday asked U.S. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George to step down and retire effective immediately during a war. Makes you wonder what's going on behind the scenes. Says the abrupt move, one of 3 significant changes made by Hegseth the same day, cut short George's tenure, which began in September 2023, well before the end of the typical 4-year term. The Pentagon intends to replace him with a leader aligned with Hegseth and President Donald Trump's vision for the Army. The official added, they did not specify what that vision entails. I don't know, before people even start asking me, I don't know the details of this transition. I was looking, I tried to see if I can find any scent to get me moving in the right direction. I found a whole bunch of rumors, none of which could be verified. I don't know. So the only thing I can gather, just based on an educated guess, is they were asking this general to move forward with a plan that he just would not budge on, and they had to get rid of him. That's the only thing that I can think of. What that plan entails or anything revolving that, I don't know. Again, it would just be speculation at that point, which I'm not interested in doing. As of now, though, we do know that they kicked out the longest top general in order to replace him with somebody that's going to be a yes man for the Trump administration. That's what we know. It says George has more than 4 decades of military service. 4 decades of military service, according to the Army. He was commissioned as an infantry officer from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in 1988 and served in the Gulf War with subsequent deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. Current Vice Chief of Staff of the Army General Christopher Leneve will replace George on an interim basis. Hegseth on Thursday also removed General David Horn, a former Army Ranger who had been overseeing the Army's Transformation and Training Command, and Major General William Green, the Army Chief of Chaplains. We'll get to that in a second. Since taking office, Hegseth has fired over a dozen generals and admirals, including Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, and Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Lisa Franchetti. The latest shakeup coincides with the Pentagon's deployment of thousands of troops from the Army's elite 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East as the war with Iran enters a fifth week. So again, I don't know why they kicked him out. Probably has to do with he was unwilling to do some orders that we probably shouldn't be doing, but in order to make this agenda happen, they got to do it. That's the only thing I can think of. Now let's talk about this. For the first time ever, Army Chief of Chaplains was fired by Hegseth. For the first time in history, the U.S. Army Chief of Chaplains has been fired by the Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth made national headlines April 2nd for firing General Randy George, the Army's Chief of Staff, but on the same day, Hegseth removed Army Major General William Green, who had served in that post since 2023. Traditionally, a person who serves as Army Chief of Chaplains for a 4-year term and no reason was given publicly for Green's dismissal. Green's unusual dismissal came amid a shakeup of top army brass deployed by Hegseth, an avowed Christian nationalist. We know all about that, who believes America's war in Iran is sanctioned by God. Again, we just talked about that. He prays publicly for God to intervene and mercilessly slaughter anybody who stands in the way of the United States. What a sick individual and what a sick movement the Christian nationalist movement is. Hegseth also pushed for changes in the work of military chaplains, telling them to be less therapeutic and more pastoral. So when it comes to this one, I found a little bit more weight to the possibility of why. Again, I don't know for sure, but again, I think there's a little bit more weight to it. He was behind the scenes. William Green, the chief chaplain dude, was he was vocally against using God as a wartime pusher, because what they're doing, Hegseth is saying that this is a holy war and that this is God ordained, and that what they're doing is on a mission from God to go and slaughter all these people and to start these wars and everything. And so that's what they're pushing into the military. That's what they're telling the soldiers. And from what my understanding is, William Green here, again, I don't necessarily know his beliefs, so I don't know on that, but he was standing against this, and they will not stand for that. And so I guess that's why they got rid of him. Do with that what you will. But it just goes to show what's going on, how this administration is operating. It's remarkable. It's remarkable. How's everybody doing? Everybody okay? This has kind of been a rough one. I understand that. Yeah. Proton Girl says that doesn't make any sense, being that he's a Christian nationalist. Well, the chaplain, I guess, isn't. Hegseth is. And Christian nationalism, again, they're pushing this whole idea that it's all God ordained and they need to go and, again, dominionism, take over, implement. That's what they're doing. That's why they think this is God ordained. That's why they think that they've been chosen to go and slaughter all these people so they can institute the Christian nationalist dominion across the earth. So again, it all fits there. Jellyfish hanging in there, good. Psych Nurse, good. Rick Whitaker still here, doing okay. That's good. All right. Bab Bab says, who is their God? Satan. Clear as day on that one. All right. Let's keep it rolling. All right. Trump proposes to begin privatizing TSA screening operations. So this is something that I believe is definitely being implemented by that partial government shutdown, as well as the energy reset. This is allowing them to do this. So we know that they've already implemented ICE at many of the airports, and they're there indefinitely, of course, with no end in sight. And now Trump wants to privatize TSA. Says Trump on Friday proposed to begin privatizing airport security operations handled by the Transportation Security Administration in an effort to save money. The White House budget proposes cutting funding for the federal agency created after the September 11th, 2001 attacks by $52 million, and would require small airports to enroll in a program in which TSA pays for private screeners. So privatizing TSA means more contracts for Trump's buddies. This moves us further into the fascist corporatism side side of things. TSA has about 50,000 federal employees who handle screening at nearly all U.S. airports. That's not including the ICE agents that are there now. In recent weeks, major U.S. airports suffered massive disruptions after TSA security officers went unpaid since mid-February after funding for the workers was halted in a budget dispute. The standoff in Congress led to daily absences of 10% or more of TSA workers and brought chaos and long security lines to the U.S. airports. The agency said on Monday that the absence rate fell to 8.6% after the security officers were finally paid. So again, we're moving towards the fascist side of things, but what's also interesting about this is if we take a look at the handy-dandy Project 2025, you guys remember this, right? It's still going. If you go to page 134 out of the 920 pages of it, this is part of Project 2025, the Transportation Security Administration to be privatized. So while all the other chaos is happening, they are still implementing Project 2025. Still being implemented. And this was something that's a part of it, is the privatization of the TSA, working right towards it, working right towards the goal. So if you have a private TSA contracts or private contracts with like a group that controls TSA agents, and then you have ICE also there, man, we are full court press heading towards authoritarianism, if I've ever seen it before. Okay. Let's take a step outside the United States and let's take a look at what's going on when it comes to this whole EU situation, because again, I really do think that this is something that we need to keep an eye on and we need to continue to make sure that we're aware of when it comes to all these little details regarding the splintering of the United States away from the EU and NATO. And it's getting much more rough publicly out there. Macron rallies allies against the United States and China dominance. Wait a minute. All of a sudden, according to Macron here, we're in alignment with China. That's not what the narrative tells us. But now, all of a sudden, we're one of the bad guys. We're with the China side of things on how we're viewed. He says, our objective is not to be the vassals of two hegemonic powers, he told students in Seoul, Korea. We don't want to depend on dominance, let's say on China, or we don't want to be too much exposed to the unpredictability of the United States. Very interesting that all of a sudden we're getting pushed to the side of China when it comes to the Europe powers. This is French President Emmanuel Macron is calling on medium-sized powers to join forces and stand up to the United States and China. Macron hammered the message during a tour of Asia this week, where he discussed maritime security in the Strait of Hormuz and closer cooperation with South Korea and Japan, two countries badly suffering from high energy costs as the war in Iran keeps the strait closed. Says Macron, who oversees the European Union's sole nuclear power and its most powerful defense industry, has long been calling for Europe to counterbalance the U.S. and China. During a trip to China in 2023, he sparked outrage among U.S. allies in Asia and Europe when he said that the EU would not be a vassal to the United States. Over the past few years, following a tradition established by France's World War II leader Charles de Gaulle, Macron has repeatedly sought to strike a middle path between China and the United States, warning against a split in the global order. Certainly hope some ears are perking up about all this. But the U.S. flouting international institutions, the traditional French position is resonating differently. Macron will push his message in June when he hosts the G7 summit in France. Macron's pleas come as U.S. President Donald Trump has also renewed his attacks against NATO and other allies, specifically blasting France and South Korea for not keeping him helping him enough in Iran. Keep in mind, one of the ships that paid the $2 million in Chinese yuan to get through the strait was a French ship. Keep that in mind. Says, I don't believe that we will fix the situation just by bombing or by military operations, he argued, alluding to Iran. The French leader cited Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. We never deliver. Truth hurts. Truth hurts. So we got some more publicly vocal strikes coming between the United States and Europe regarding all of this. This comes on this one where it says U.S.-Europe rift widens as Trump lashes out at NATO, allies over Mideast war. It says U.S. President Donald Trump has been fuming about NATO, musing about leaving the alliance, ratcheting up his criticism of the European leaders, and exposing a wider rift in the transatlantic alliance, this time over the Iran war. NATO treated us very badly, and you have to remember it because they'll be treating us badly again if we ever need them, Trump said Wednesday at a private White House lunch. The president also suggested in an interview to the Telegraph newspaper in the UK published Wednesday that he could potentially try to leave the alliance. Yet in his televised Wednesday evening address to the American people about the Iran war, Trump chose not to mention NATO by name. Trump's tension over NATO reflects the potentially dangerous consequences of breaking up the alliance and limits on his own power to do so and careful mending of the relationship performed by fellow world leaders. But one certainly is that Trump's displeasure with NATO appears to be a feature of his presidency rather than an issue that can be easily settled. It says Congress passed legislation in 2023 that would prevent any president from pulling out of NATO without its approval. The Trump administration during his first term had insisted that the president had such authority on his own. What's interesting, and I always like to put things in this perspective. Do you guys remember, we talked about this, it was a few years ago, the Supreme Court issued their ruling. It says the president legally can do whatever they need to do on the basis of presidential duties. You guys remember that? Which opened up the door, which opened up the can of worms, allowing Trump to just bypass Congress, to bypass legality, to do away with the three branches and just continue to take over and do what he's doing. All of these things he's able to do because a president was set by the Supreme Court saying, as long as it falls within presidential duties, he's not legally liable. And so this idea of Trump can't pull out of NATO on his own decision because it requires, congressional approval. Again, what else has Trump been doing that requires congressional approval and they're just doing it? So it makes you wonder if that's what's coming in the future. As if they're just going to do it, split it, and remove it. It says there are efforts underway to reinforce America's relationship with NATO, with its Secretary General Mark Rutte scheduled to visit Washington next week. Don't fall for that narrative as well. We've talked about it. Mark Rutte is best friends with Trump, and he's the puppet within NATO because he's the spokesperson, Secretary General type of thing. He's the one that's supposed to keep all the nations together and whatnot. When Mark Rutte has been undermining the European Union the entire time. He's the one that started coming out publicly about the Trump deal for Greenland and it was a lie. All that facade that was coming out regarding that. That's Mark Rutte. He's a puppet for the Trump administration, and so this idea that Mark Rutte's going to try and bring the United States back with NATO and better relations and stuff is entirely false. Mark Rutte is the weasel on the inside that's helping make all this happen. And so that's also significant to remember. It says on Thursday, British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper will host a virtual meeting of 35 countries that have signed up to help ensure security for shipping in the Strait after the fighting ends. What's interesting is 35 countries are going to get together regarding the Strait of Hormuz. However, the U.S. understood not to be invited directly to talks that will explore ways of reopening critical waterway. The UK will convene 35 countries, excluding the United States, to explore ways to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Divide, divide, divide. Splinter, splinter, splinter. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, said that the next phase of discussions in the joint British and French efforts to secure the waterway would be held on Thursday with Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, alongside international leaders. Interesting. Now it says, time to re-examine the relationship, Rubio says. As energy prices have spiked, Trump has called NATO allies cowards for not sending their military ships to the Strait. Funny, because the United States won't even send their ships to the Strait. It's an amplification of his message since the first term that the European partners should assume greater responsibility for their own security. Speaking Tuesday on Fox News, Rubio said, I do think, unfortunately, we are going to have to re-examine whether or not this alliance, the NATO alliance, that has served this country well for a while, is still serving that purpose. The fraying of NATO could weaken the alliance's deterrence, particularly with Russia. And again, for those who don't want to be duped by the narrative and are willing to see the facts, verifiable facts and evidence of the reality of the situation, we understand that Trump is a Russian asset. And they are working hand in hand, which I believe, to prepare for the disassociation of the United States from NATO and the EU, which will then allow full collapse of Europe and allow Russia to go in and take what they want to take and so on and so forth. We'll see. But the trend is going in that direction. Very interesting. Speaking of the United States and Russia, U.S. removes Russian national Mikhail Zadornov from sanctions list. Another Russian removed from United States sanctions. They're removing oil companies. They're removing politicians. They're removing diplomats. They just removed all the sanctions from the Russian diplomats, the Duma that came and visited the United States Capitol. And now they're removing another one. The United States on Friday removed sanctions against Mikhail Zadornov, a prominent Russian banker and former finance minister, according to the U.S. Treasury Department website. Zadornov, who was placed on the sanctions list in 2022 following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, successfully petitioned Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control, the OFAC, to be removed from the sanctions list. Zadornov, a former parliament budget chairman and veteran of several Russian governments, served as the country's finance minister from 1997 to 1999 before moving to the head of the VTB-24, the retail arm of Russia's second largest bank, VTB. He then served as chief executive of the Russians' Altkritie Bank from 2018 to 2022, managing its recovery from a rescue by the Central Bank of Russia, which was acquired by the VTB at the end of 2022. Why on earth would they need to remove the sanctions off of this guy? Why? What benefit is there? Well, probably Putin just picked up the phone and called Trump and said, hey, I got this guy. Can you take the sanctions off? We'll make it worth your while. And Trump says, okay. Simple as that. Because they're friends. Because they work together. Which leads us to this. Putin's pals say Trump is now their ally versus the West. Not. I want you guys to make sure that you understand. Putin pals say Trump is now their ally, okay, versus the West. Well, who would that be? Europe. What is all the evidence that we've been collecting? Again, this evidence is not mainstream media news. No, this is little evidence that's not being reported. And it's been shown that Trump is aligning with Russia and against Europe, even viewing them as enemies. As President Donald Trump's decision to pause aid to Ukraine prompted immediate jubilation in Russia. During this his morning radio show Full Contact on Tuesday, top state TV propagandist Vladimir Solyov triumphantly announced, "The masks are off. We now see that Europe is behind the war. They are totally satanic, he added while describing Trump as Russia's situational ally. In an Orwellian reversal, Solyulov asserted that Russia had never had any issues with America, attempting to erase years of previous proclamations that Russia was always at war with the U.S. The war in Ukraine was actually a confrontation between Russia and the United States, that America had been waging war against Russia since 1945, and the Cold War never ended. So what state TV in Russia is saying is that's all lies. That America was never at war with Russia. That the Cold War was real. That there was never a confrontation between Russia and the United States. That the war in Ukraine was never what we were told for. They're telling us this stuff. And again, we've talked about bits and pieces that shows that these countries have been using each other to push forward, all under the narrative that we're at war with them. Very interesting. So because this is Russia's state TV, most people would say that this is just more lies being pushed out. But as we've discovered here in the West, you'll notice that much of the leftist media that was all propaganda when Biden was in office, well, now we can see that a lot of what they're saying is actually telling the truth about what Trump actually was. Remember when they were calling him a fascist, calling him Hitler, saying that they were going to get it, he was going to get us in the wars, he was going to rip apart the economy and all this stuff? Well, look at what's going on. So is he lying or is he telling the truth? Interesting. Now, this is interesting. It says, while the U.S. was always named Russia's arch nemesis, Trumpushka, as Solyov affectionately refers to the MAGA leader, was consistently claimed as Russia's own. Well, we know that Trump is a Russian asset. Why? We did the history. We went back to the 80s when he was brought in by the Kremlin and then sent out to be the United States president. We did the research. We showed it. It's there. I think we should all just start calling him Trumpushka now. And when people go, what? You can say it, well, because that's the Russian asset. Trumpushka. That's our Trumpushka. I think I'm going to start calling him that from now on. I think it fits perfectly. So it's Trumpushka now. State TV experts continually explain that during Trumpushka's first term, his desire to bond with Putin was constrained by his hawkish team. So again, this was during his first term. They asserted that once Trump is reelected, he would finally come through and fulfill Moscow's dreams. What's the list? By cutting off aid to Ukraine, destroying relations with allies, disrupting internal workings of the U.S. government, lifting Russian sanctions, and even withdrawing America from NATO. Okay. Trumpushka dolls. That's right, David. We need to get a Trumpushka. So let's look at this list. Are you guys interested in taking a look at the verifiable reality of this situation? So state TV says that when Trump got into his second reelected term, he was going to fulfill the checklist for Moscow. Let's take a look. Cutting off of aid to Ukraine. Done. Trump did it. Destroying relations with allies. Take a look at what he's doing to the European allies right now. Done. Or in the process of being done. Disrupting internal workings of the United States government. Triple check that one. Lifting Russian sanctions. We just went over one like 5 minutes ago. Add that to the list of all the Russians that have been all their sanctions lifted. And withdrawing America from NATO, which we are getting much more heavy and public talk of the United States doing just that. But yet, people will reject this. that can be verified because they have a narrative to continue to stick to that the United States is not globalist and is against Russia and against China. Even though Trump and his administration is accomplishing everything that Russia needs. And whatever Russia needs is according to what the globalists need. The only thing that is surprising Putin's mouthpieces is the speed at which the American president, Trumpushka, is fulfilling Russia's dreams. Solyov noted, "I will watch Trumpushka going to war with Europe. It will give me great pleasure. Here's how it will go." So this is his prediction. Now, interesting, we've gone over a couple of predictions from Russian state TV that turned out to be verifiably true. So this will be interesting if this one comes to play. So we don't know if this is actually going to happen, but keep it in mind. So if it does happen, we're not caught off guard, and it only confirms what we already know. He says the annexation of Greenland will come, the disintegration of NATO, and the destruction of the European Union, and Trump will no longer recognize, and the economic war between America and Europe. So he says that those things will happen. The annexation of Greenland, the disintegration of NATO, the destruction of the European that Trump will no longer recognize, and an economic war between America and Europe. Very interesting. I had not seen this before, but these are multiple things that I have been warning about for several months. And I said, I think this is coming. And it's interesting that his list is identical to the one that I've been thinking about myself. It's going to be interesting to see if this comes to pass. Again, I don't know, but this is just the avenue of thinking that I've had. And it's interesting to hear that come out of this dude's mouth. It says Russian lawmakers anticipated and accurately predicted the breakdown in relations between the Trump administration and the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. At the same time, the Kremlin fully expected Trumpushka's embrace of the Russian leader, whom he showered with unreciprocated concessions. Both Putin spokesman Dmitry Peskov and his top propagandist Vladimir Solyov admitted a remarkable alignment of their views with those of the current occupants of the Oval Office. Solyov brought up the $100 billion U.S. investment by Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Co., enviously pondering why Russia hasn't created similar opportunities for foreign industries. He even envisioned a future economic and even military alliance between Russia and Trump's America. I haven't thought that far on things, but who knows? Solyov triumphantly exclaimed, "I don't rule out that with respect to the aid to Ukraine that was frozen, Trump will say, why don't we enter into a military technical cooperation with Russia? Here is who the real enemies of America are, the satanic Europe and the European Union." Trump already hinted about this yesterday. And in his defense policy, claimed that Europe is now becoming an enemy. Fiona Fapp, how does Trump not know that he is playing into their hands? He knows. He knows. He's playing his part. Again, he's had a relationship with Russia and the globalists for a very long time. Very long time. And this was all set up decades ago. And it's coming to fruition. And I'd say it's working swimmingly right now. I don't know how anybody who has actively chosen to do research on this particular line of thinking can walk away and not see the connections between the Trump administration and the Kremlin. I don't see it. These guys, it's so obvious. Their connections are so obvious. The working is so obvious. And now we're seeing this development of the United States against Europe and NATO. And it's dividing even further. I warn you guys, again, I don't want to tell you what to think. I don't want to do anything like that. I just tell you, be very cautious about believing the narrative that the United States is against is against Russia. Just, that's all I can say. Be very careful. Be very careful. All right. Yeah, David McBride, obvious. 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 Misfit Carol says they need Jesus. I don't know who they are, but they all need Jesus. We all need Jesus. So I agree with that. We all need Jesus. All right, let's finish off with this. Just want to throw this in. Latest development regarding Todd Blanche here and the Attorney General situation and everything like that. So this is from May of 2025, but I wanted to start here before we get into the next thing. So in May of 2025, okay, before we even get there, if you guys don't know, if you guys did not see my Wretched recap I did on Friday, talked about how Pam Bondi was fired. So she got fired. She's going to get moved to another section of the government, kind of like what they did with Kristi Noem. So she's not gone, but obviously they're done with her in that position for whatever reason it is. And so she was replaced by Todd Blanche. And so in May of 2025, when Trump came in, he named Todd Blanche the official to head the Library of Congress. And it says Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, it says yesterday on there, but this is from the archive. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche would assume the acting role days after Trump fired Librarian Congress Carla Hayden 9 years into her 10-year term. President Donald Trump has chosen Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, the number 2 official at the Justice Department, to also serve as the acting head of the Library of Congress. So Todd Blanche, while he was the Deputy Attorney General, he was also the head of the Library of Congress. Now that Pam Bondi is out, he has taken over as the Attorney General as well. What's interesting about all this is unconstitutional and illegal. Again, Trump doesn't care, and nothing's being done about it. An official cannot hold a position in 2 separate branches. The checks and balances goes out the window if you do that. But because we know the Trump administration is authoritarian and they don't care what's constitutional, they don't care what's legal, they have this dude who's in both a congressional legislative position as well as an executive position, and that's unconstitutional. So then we get to this. This was April 2nd. From Trump's criminal defense lawyer, if you guys don't know, Todd Blanche was also Trump's personal defense lawyer, to acting attorney general. Who is Todd Blanche? We'll just go over a few things. Pam Bondi's departure has set up one of President Donald Trump's staunchest legal allies to take over as acting attorney general. But as the spotlight on Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche grows following Tuesday's Justice Department shakeup, questions are sure to arise about the deep loyalty to the president and handling of key investigations, including the Jeffrey Epstein probe. Blanche, 51, previously represented Trump after his first term in the White House in the criminal cases brought by Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and former special counsel Jack Smith. And we've gone over all that stuff, and we know Eileen Cannon has been blocking Jack Smith's report regarding all of this stuff, so it's all interconnected. It says after Trump was reelected president in November 2024, Jack Smith's probe into allegations that Trump attempted to overturn the 2020 election was dismissed without prejudice due to the Justice Department's longstanding policy barring the prosecution of a sitting president. It says Trump appointed Blanche to the number 2 position at the Justice Department after assuming office, prompting criticism from Democrats and other opponents who contended that the president was filling the Justice Department with biased loyalists. Can we truly deny that that is not what Trump is doing? That's exactly what he's doing. He is filling his administration with yes men who are there to fulfill the globalist and his personal stuff to fulfill this authoritarian regime. And so that's absolutely happening. So during confirmation hearings, before being confirmed in March 2025, Blanche repeatedly dodged questions about whether he would recuse himself from matters related to Trump. And Blanche was frequently seen with Bondi and backed the department's probes into the president's opponent, such as former FBI Director James Comey, who Trump fired, and the administration's immigration enforcement operations. And again, if you guys don't know, Todd Blanche has already come out and said that there will be no more Epstein file releases. It's done. It's over. No names, no lists, no documents. It's over. And so it's not like we were getting the truth out of those things anyways, but it looks like that PSYOP's done for at least the time being. It says last week, Blanche spoke to the Conservative Political Action Conference where he cheered the department's removal of what he said were over 200 officials tied to the past investigations of Trump, again, removing all political opposition out of the administration and the government. And he cited Trump's day one pardons, all of which defendants charged in the connection with the January 6th attack on the Capitol, as among the top accomplishments of the administration. There's not a single man or woman with a gun, federal agent, still in that organization that had anything to do with the prosecution of President Trump, he said in a sit-down interview with CPAC chair Matt Schlapp. He just said this, that there is not one single person left in the Department of Justice that stands against Trump. He confirmed it, which means Trump owns the Department of Justice now. They control it, which means the Department of Justice will do whatever Trump asks of them. And now this dude is leading it. So for those who thought all the lawfare was over, it's just getting started, apparently. Just getting started. Now, that leads us to this, sticking with the Justice Department. And this is interesting, because the Department of Justice just came out and said Trump does not have to turn over presidential records. Do you guys remember? We just went over it like a minute ago, that those were the records that Trump was holding in his Mar-a-Lago home after his first term. He took all those documents. Well, now the Department of Justice, who is controlled by the Trump administration now, says that he doesn't have to turn that stuff over anymore. The Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel found that the 1978 Presidential Records Act was unconstitutional. Fascinating. So now that he's in office again, his Department of Justice comes out and says that the 1978 Presidential Records Act is now unconstitutional. Interesting, because if we go back to June 29th, 2023, Trump, after being indicted for allegedly mishandling classified documents, claims that he's innocent under the Presidential Records Act. So the very act that he used as a defense to protect himself against taking the documents after his first presidential term, his Department of Justice is now coming out saying that it's unconstitutional and Trump does not have to turn over any presidential records anymore. Does anybody see what's going on here? I certainly hope that you are. It says former President Donald Trump pleaded not guilty. Again, this was back in 2023 in June to 37 federal felony counts related to alleged mishandling of classified documents found at the Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, Florida. Trump had repeatedly claimed of no wrongdoing, stating in a previous speech that under the Presidential Records Act, which is civil, not criminal, I had every right to have these documents. That same act that he used to protect himself back then is now being deemed as unconstitutional, which means he won't ever have to give up presidential records. Trump was charged with 37 counts in an indictment brought by special counsel Jack Smith that alleges he illegally retained national defense information, concealed documents, and obstructed the Department of Justice investigation into handling those materials. The Presidential Records Act, which was enacted in 1978 as a response to Nixon's Watergate scandal, changed the ownership of presidential records from the president to the government. So let's get back to present day, where they just deem this thing unconstitutional. It says the Justice Department has issued a legal opinion arguing that President Donald Trump does not have to turn over any presidential records to the National Archives at the end of his administration. The Presidential Records Act of 1978 requires presidential documents to be sent to the National Archives and Records Administration in an opinion released Thursday. The Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel found the law is unconstitutional for two independent but interlocking reasons. It exceeds Congress' power, and it does so at the expense of the autonomy of the presidency. T. Elliot Gazer wrote in an opinion noting that Congress can't order the papers of Supreme Court justices to be sent to the archives. The president need not further comply with its dictates. The determination is a signal that the president will not turn over his documents to the archives. Again, I'm not sure he's looking to leave the White House. Trump was accused of violating the Presidential Records Act by refusing to turn over documents he kept after leaving office following his first term. And according to federal prosecutors, Trump willfully retained national defense documents at his private home in Mar-a-Lago, obstructed justice, and concealed materials, including a classified military map, reportedly shown to unauthorized individuals. The case was dismissed by Judge Eileen Cannon, who's on Trump's payroll and has blocked the second most important investigation documents of Jack Smith's thing, which they're still trying to get overturned, in 2024 before he won re-election. A memo by the special prosecutor's office later released found that the president kept a document that was previously accessible by only a few people at his home. Trump has long argued he did nothing wrong. Shortly after he took office, he dismissed the head of the National Archives, following through on a vow to change the leadership atop the agency, which was involved in the criminal case against him. Again, getting rid of anybody who would be a political enemy. Presidential Records Act, signed into law by President Jimmy Carter in 1978, followed the Watergate scandal, requires official records of the president and vice president created or received after January 1981 to be made public, and for the National Archives to manage a president's records after the individual leaves office. Of course, only the ones approved for public release, because there's a ton of that stuff that we do not get to see. But don't worry. He's blessing America. As long as you're willing to be willfully ignorant of it. Again, this isn't political shots against a politician for, just because I have a vendetta against the person. No. This is me trying to bring forth as much information regarding the corruption, the lawlessness, and the complete transformation of this country, which I believe is aligning perfectly with the geopolitical power shifts currently happening all around the world right in front of our very eyes, which I believe has everything to do with the last days and setting things up for the coming end times, post-rapture into the day of the Lord. I firmly believe that. That's why I'm talking about these things. These little things, which for most people would be deemed nothing but just political stuff. Oh, he wants to take this, and he wants this budget, and he wants to do that. It has nothing to do with just taking shots at that. We're trying to dig deeper and connect dots that aren't necessarily looked at, except for those willing to actually be the watchmen we're called to be by God within his word. And I don't know about you guys, but I take that call very seriously. I do. I take it very seriously. I don't want to be deceived. I don't want my personal bias and preconceived notions to lead me down false reality. I want to be able to see what's going on. I want to be able to make sure that I'm not caught off guard by these things, that I'm prepped and ready for whatever information comes at me. I would say the next day, but now I say the next hour because this stuff's happening hourly. That's what I want for myself, and I believe that God has given me that desire to do that. And he's given me the ability to be able to share that with you guys, which I believe the only reason why you guys are here is because you have the same desire. You want that same thing. You don't want to be led by narratives and propaganda and deception and by your own personal bias and leanings and stuff. We all have them. But you also want to make sure that you're being the best watchman that you possibly can, because we're called to do so. I believe that's you guys. Otherwise, why would you be here? Why would you be here? Well, I know there's a few people that hate watch me. I know that. Hi, what's up, guys? Good to see you. I'm sure you'll take back that little nugget back to your little leader of Brainerd. Have fun with that. I don't care. But that's why we talk about these things. That's why we discuss these things. For those who are here because you are seeking the truth of what's going on, and you have a desire to uncover what's going on, but you don't have the same hope that a lot of us have. It's the salvation in Christ Jesus, who is the truth. He is the truth. The truth is not something that sways in the wind and moves about the world according to whatever happens randomly. No. Christ Jesus is the truth. He is the way. He is the life. He is the truth. So if you don't have Jesus Christ, I plead with you, do not wait and get your life to him. His salvation is offered as a free gift. He's literally there with outstretched hands, waiting for you to just simply take it. And his gospel is as simple as ABC. A is you admit that you're a sinner. The act of repentance, metanoia, changing of mind, turning from self to Christ. It's through this repentance that allows us to have true belief, because how can we believe in Jesus Christ as our Savior if we don't know why we need him? So it's through repentance where we admit we fall short. We admit our sin. We admit the need of a Savior that allows us to have true belief in Jesus Christ as our Savior. So B is believe. We believe that Jesus Christ is the one and only begotten Son of God, that he came down 100% man, 100% God, the God-man, the one and only. And he lived the perfect sinless life, the only one to do so, the spotless Lamb, the blood that was shed on Passover. And it's through him that we receive life, because he's the one that lived the perfect sinless life. He went to the cross. He took our place upon that cross. He was crucified and he died. But because of the power in Christ's blood that he spilled for us, he defeated death and rose again. For all who believe in him shall not perish but live forever in his presence and in his glory. It's his glory. When we place our belief in him, we place our belief in Jesus Christ. We place our faith and our belief in his death, burial, and resurrection. We place our faith in his spilled blood. And we place our faith in the finished tetelestai work upon that cross. It's not something we can earn, buy, transact. It's not for us to give, but it's something for us to receive and to share with others so they may receive it as well. And C, as we call upon the Lord and we receive salvation, we are indwelt with the Holy Spirit, and we are given an incredible supernatural gift of prayer, where we can go to our Father at any moment of any day. We can say, Lord God, thank you. Thank you for sending your Son, Jesus Christ, to live perfectly, to die willingly, and to defeat death, so we may live. Lord, especially during this week, especially during this time, Jesus, we look to you. We praise you. We thank you. We celebrate you. Something that we should do every day throughout our lives, but especially during this time, because we understand that this is the very foundation of our faith, the very foundation of our belief, and the very foundation of receiving life. And we thank you, Lord. God, please give us the ability to see through the fog of deception that's getting thicker by the day. Help us to give us the endurance and the stamina to just continue to run this race that's getting so very difficult to do, but we understand that through you we can do this. Give us the boldness to speak the name of Jesus in the darkest of places, so that others may have the same salvation and hope that we have in your Son, Jesus. And we ask, Jesus, please come soon. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. See here. Got a few questions. Looks like we're actually going to get out of here. Well, we're still technically a little late. Even though we've been going about 3 hours for several months, we're supposed to be about an hour and a half to 2 hours, but we're a little late, but much earlier than we usually are. We got a few questions, though. Oh, excuse me. Wow. Indigestion is not fun, kids. Let's see here. Jules. Every time I hear Jules, I think of Psych. For those who have seen the show, you get it. For those who haven't, don't even worry about it. Okay. Do you believe that the IRGC has U.S. soldiers? Trump is reported to be in the White House. He has given Iran 48 hours for a deal. I've heard over the course of this war that there's a chance that Iran has U.S. hostages. There's nothing that I've seen that I can confirm it. However, there's nothing that I've seen that denies it either. So it's kind of just an open-ended possibility. I don't have anything that I can confirm or deny that it actually is legit. I do know that there was a lid put on Trump today, which means there's going to be no public announcements or anything. And he brought the Security Council to the White House. So it sounds like something's escalating. But for the idea of possible hostages, U.S. soldier hostages, I can't tie those together. So unfortunately, I cannot give you any information other than that. I can't answer your question on that one. Let's see here. Chris, believer in Jesus, how many penguin ninjas does it take to fly a zoo of animals to Madagascar? 4, I believe. You got the skipper, you got Kowalski, and I can't remember the other two. Yeah, the penguins of Madagascar. Who are the other ones? Skipper, Kowalski. Oh, come on, somebody help me out here. I can't remember the names of them. I don't know. All right. Somebody will put it in the chat. I wish I could remember the other. I love the penguins of Madagascar. They're great. Anyways. All right. Let's keep going. Psych nurse question: 2 Russian submarines still visiting California coastal shores? Your guess is as good as mine, man. I don't know. There's Russian subs everywhere, according to all the reports, so I don't really know where they're at. Man, I was hoping somebody would be able to help me out with the other 2 penguin names. Anyways, I don't know as far as the Russian subs. There's Russian subs all over the place, according to these people. Fiona Fat brings in Gilligan's Island. No, that's different. Skipper, Kowalski, Rico, and Private. That's it. Rico and Private. Rico's the one that's got all the stuff that the equipment he throws up, and Private's the young one. That's right. Okay. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. It was going to drive me nuts about the penguins. Bab, any idea how tall the golden image or the statue is that Trump has planned for his Miami presidential tower? I don't think they gave dimensions for that thing, but based on the mock-up that they did, that thing is huge. You're looking at probably 5 or 6 stories if you're looking at it, because that thing is massive. So, but yeah, I don't think they announced like a actual size for it. Looks very North Korean-ish, though. Seichner's question. We've got Russian submarines on our California coastal shores and Chinese balloons floating over and cartels infiltrating. What's America's chance of survival? Well, the fact that we're not mentioned in the end times prophecy is not a good sign there, Seichner's. But that's okay, because we're going to be gone. The church will be out of here, so it doesn't matter for us. Let's see here. Is that Cattle, Katie, 8847? If our country doesn't have the money, how does Trump ask for more? They can snip here and there, but none of it makes sense. Print, baby, print. That's the joys of fiat currency, and where they can just continue to print more and more and more, and it's just made out of thin air. It's funny money. It's monopoly money. That's how fiat works. Of course, when it comes to actual currency like gold, it's something that there is a finite amount of it. But when it comes to fiat currency, it's infinite. They can print as much as they want until they're ready to do a global financial reset, which is coming. We don't know when it's coming, but that's how they can do it. So while our debt goes up, while we're out of money and we're, insolvent and bankrupt and all these things, they continue to just print more money and just add it to the record sheet, because eventually it'll all get wiped away when they do the reset. So that's why they needed to shift off the gold standard, because it's finite. You actually have to own it. And fiat, they can just continue to print it. That's why. So it's monopoly money. That's all it is. 16 tons, number 9 coal. Question, is the pre-trib eschatology view considered the minority view amongst the general Christian community? I would say that the pre-trib idea is shrinking. I'd say that the pre-trib view of things is shrinking. I'd actually have to look at numbers to see if it's considered the actual minority. But I do believe that it's working its way towards that. I do believe that. I know the view of post-trib has skyrocketed recently, at least from the position that I've seen. It's definitely become more of a view taken up and argued for by people. So that's what I would say. I'd say it's shrinking. I would actually have to look before I can confirm that it is the minority. But I would say that it's on its way to becoming it if it's not already. Just like the view of a replacement theology is also skyrocketed. And I do believe that those who separate the church in Israel has become the minority view of things. I do believe that as well. It's interesting. I always take the position that when something continues to lose support and people valiantly fight against it, you're usually, not every time, but usually in the right viewpoint of things, especially since the Bible said that those factors are going to be something that's going to be rejected by the majority. And so when you become part of that minority of belief, specifically scripture and prophetic eschatology, you're usually on the right side of things. So God's Marine, I think this is the last question. What is your opinion or belief on thou shalt not kill in Ecclesiastes 3? There's a time to kill and there's a difference between premeditated murder and self-defense. That's an interesting and loaded question. I'll try and break this down very simply. What is your position on thou shalt not kill? And see, that's one of the arguments that I hear from a lot of atheists and non-believers is your Bible contradicts itself because it says thou shalt not kill, but then it also says there's a time for war and time for killing and stuff like that. Well, because there is a certain separation. So when it's just, again, I'm not a pastor or anything like that, but I always take it from the viewpoint of thou shalt not kill is not one of those things where you just go out willy-nilly and kill for whatever reason is going on. But there are designated times, which can be confirmed in scripture, when God intervenes for a time for war and killing is involved. So it's one of those things where I would view, just to put it in a real life scenario, because I think it's the best way to put it in a real life scenario. If you look at a lot of the wars that we're a part of, where people are going and killing these people, we're being told it's for righteous reasons. But if you actually look at the reasons for those war, they're not for righteous reasons. And those are times not for war. And those are times not to kill, even though we're being told that they are. However, there are times when it comes to certain situations, the Bible does go over those reasons, there's a time that you can be permitted to do so. So again, that would be one where I would need to actually pull stuff up and go over in depth, but there is a time for killing and there's a time to thou shalt not kill. So yeah, murder. Yeah. So it all depends on that. Again, we'd be here for a while going over all that stuff. And again, I'm not prepared to go over it. So hopefully that helps on all that. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you for joining me. And usual spiel, if you guys can, like, share, subscribe. Get this out to as many people as you can. It's not about views, not about butts and seats, but it is about getting the warning out to people and getting people to Jesus. So if you guys can do me a solid and like, share, subscribe, I'd certainly appreciate it. Again, we're trying to get out there to people so we can warn. There's a lot of people out there that don't have the Lord, that are just trying to figure out what's going on. And hopefully we can reach those people and get them the gospel before all hell breaks loose. So yeah, can you guys believe it? Hell hasn't even been unleashed yet. Imagine that. But yeah, please like, share, subscribe. Certainly appreciate it. Also follow along on Rumble and Telegram. If you guys would like to do so. Rumble's a backup channel that we live stream. And then Telegram post updates, announcements, and other little things that I can't necessarily put in video format. So if you have those platforms, feel free to follow along. If not, no worries. Just make sure you guys bookmark the WretchedWatchmen.com website. That's your one-stop shop to stay up to date on everything happening in the Wretched Watchmen world of things. You'll find the latest podcasts and live streams. You'll find the announcement page, the free book to download, and all that jazz can be found there. So bookmark the website. And last but not least, if you guys like to support this channel, I got donation links down below. CashApp, Venmo, and GiveStandGo. This channel's not monetized. I don't make anything from ads, views, or anything like that. Runs solely off of your guys' generous donations. So if you guys like to support this channel and help keep it going and do what we do, those links are below. Thank you guys for your support. Thank you for your donations and your prayers. I can't even begin to tell you how much I appreciate you guys. So thank you. Again, you are the ones that make this work. So thank you. All right, tomorrow is Sunday. Get your wretched, heathenic, misfit booties to church, whether online, in person, doesn't matter, as long as it's a Bible-believing Christ, following church. Get there. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Maranatha.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.